Looking at the differences between prisms and pyramids, as well as looking at cones and cylinders, and also being able to recognize some of the different parts of these three-dimensional solids, getting some of that vocabulary behind us. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to pick up the shape that you believe is a triangular prism. Pick up the shape that you believe is a triangular prism. It's okay to be wrong here. So each pair should be holding up one shape. Please hold it up in the air so I can see what you have in your hand. Christopher, you seem to disagree with most of the rest of your teammates. Why did you pick up that shape? Everybody else put your shapes down. He said it's not a pyramid. And so he's looking around at the shape that most of you held up. And he says that looks like a pyramid, which makes me think that it can't be one of those things. So he narrowed it down to immediately by looking at the difference between what he thought looked like a pyramid and what looked like a something different. He probably narrowed it down to the shape I have in the hand and the one he has in his hand. So of these two shapes, why did you choose the one you have in your hand?
Because it's not a pyramid and it looks more like a rectangle.
Yeah, because it's not a pyramid and it has triangles involved with it. And that's actually, without even having any sense of what's going on, Christopher is absolutely right here. So what he's recognizing is the triangle parts of it, and he's recognizing that it's not a pyramid. Now, we need to talk about why it's not a pyramid, other than to say it just looks like it's not a pyramid. We need to talk about that. So we have some things that we're going to use to talk about that. The first thing I want to talk about is faces. Before you started to cut out these shapes, they were on a net and they had a number of two-dimensional shapes. Squares, rectangles, triangles, those types of things. Each of those shapes, as on the net, is a face. And when we fold them up, they make the flat places where our shape can lie. So when we're asking how many faces does a shape have, we're asking how many flat surfaces can we set this shape on. So looking at this triangular prism that Christopher told us we had here, please do me a favor, silently count the number of faces that you believe that shape has and put that number on your hand in the air. Excellent. I see most of you showing me 5, which means you're recognizing that it has 5 faces. Now, one thing that's going to really help us be able to recognize some of this, because most of the time we are going to have to be dealing with two-dimensional, I want you to learn to draw these shapes. And I know this is a really scary undertaking to try and draw a three-dimensional shape, but I promise you, I cannot draw well at all, yet I can actually draw these shapes pretty easily. So when we're looking at drawing a triangular prism, you start by drawing 2 triangles. That are roughly the same. Notice I haven't put them right next to each other, right on top of each other. Once you draw your 2 triangles, you're going to connect your 2 triangles, top with top, right with right, left with left. And sure enough, if you look at it and you take your triangular prism and you kind of set it next to it, you're kind of like, oh, sure enough, that does look like a triangular prism. Now, let's start talking about bases. Bases are very special faces. Wait, what did Mr. Booth just say? Bases are very special faces. So think about it this way. I am a teacher. How many teachers are in this building? 20-ish, 20, 24. Okay, How many math teachers are in this building? 4. So when you think about it, math teachers are just specialized teachers. So bases are just specialized faces. And so bases are still faces, but there's something special about them. So what makes a base special is that it is a shape or a face that you can set the shape down on, and when you look straight down, you're going to see the exact same thing. Okay? So when I set our triangular prism down on the triangle and I look straight down on it, I see the same triangle. That makes it a base. That makes it a pair of bases. Because if I flip it over, it's the same thing. So all the shapes we're going to talk about today either have 2 bases or 1. So how many bases does a triangular prism have? 2. And what is the shape of those 2 bases? Triangles. All right. Next thing we need to talk about is vertices. Vertices starts with a V. V's come to a point, which should remind you that vertices are these points on our shapes. So if I'm looking at this shape, and you're looking at it with me, probably looking at me so I can show you, because this is visual, not writing. Looking, looking, looking. So I'm looking at my points. I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 vertices. How many vertices?
6.
Edges are slightly different. It's like the corner of the room. This has 1 edge, 2 edge, 3 edges, 4 edges, 5 edges, 6 edges, coming over to the other side, 7, 8, and 9 edges. How many edges? 9. And I just threw your book on the floor. I'm so sorry. I'll pick it up, I promise. There we go. All right. Okay. So that is a triangular prism. It has 2 bases. The bases are triangles, 5 faces, 6 vertices, and 9 edges. They may ask you on any test, they may say, how many vertices does a shape have? Do I expect you to have memorized? Triangular prisms have 6 vertices. No, absolutely not. You have to be able to visualize what that shape looks like or draw what that shape looks like to help you out. So if you can draw it, which you can, you draw the 2 bases and then you connect them. You can count how many vertices and you can count how many lines that you drew to make those edges. Okay? Rectangular prism. Every pair, go ahead and hold up what you believe to be a rectangular prism. Raisa, why did you hold up that shape and not one of the other 3 shapes that we have yet to talk about? Because it's got a lot of rectangles in it, and it definitely does not look like a pyramid. Okay? How many bases does that rectangular prism have?
6.
How many bases does that rectangular prism have? Okay, so I understand that there's a lot of confusion here. Some of you are telling me 6, some of you are telling me 2. So when we're talking about the shapes that we have, our maximum number of bases is 2. It does have 6 faces, and it would seem like that if you chose any particular one of these faces, it could be a base. And that's actually accurate. Maximum number of bases, though, we're talking about is 2. What are the shapes of the bases? Rebecca? They're rectangles. So they look like squares. They might actually be squares. But just to make sure, since we haven't measured them, we're going to call them rectangles. So let's talk about drawing this really quickly. Same way we're going to draw any prism is you're going to take the two bases. Draw the two bases. That's ugly. I'm trying that again. Draw the two bases. That's much better. And connect. Top right to top right. Top left to top left. Bottom right to bottom right. Bottom left to bottom left. And if you can do that, that can help you, even if you don't have the shape directly in front of you, help you determine the next two things we're going to talk about. Question from Manuel. Statement or question-ish from Manuel. All squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares. Accurate. Okay, so looking at vertices. Let's count them out. So I'm looking at my drawing. You can be looking at your three-dimensional shape. That's totally fine. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 vertices. Now, one of the great things about drawing the shapes is that you are actually drawing the edges. Every time you draw a line segment, that is an edge. So as you're drawing it, you can be counting the edges. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. How many edges? Now, looking at our two prisms, look at the information we've written down about the prisms. With a raised hand, what is common? What is the same about all prisms? Katie. They have two bases. Now, looking at the prisms and the information we have written down about the prisms, and then looking at the names of the prisms. How do we name a prism? How do we specify what type of prism it is? Adriana, the shape of the base. All right, let's talk really quickly about cylinders. Cylinders are slightly different, but I'm going to talk about them at the same time we talk about prisms. Looking at a cylinder, like a can, how many bases does a cylinder have? 2. What's the shape of the base? Circle. How many faces?
3.
It's just 2. It's just 2. Remember, these two bases also count as faces. So you can never have less faces than you do bases. How many vertices? How many V points? None. This one's kind of tricky.
2.
How many edges?
2.
Shh. Fingers, what do you think? Okay, a lot of you are showing me 0. A lot of you are showing me 2. So when we look at a cylinder, we actually, these are edges coming right around the top, right around the bottom. Those are technically edges. Just a special thing you have to know. Now, why is it that I talk about cylinders when I talk about prisms? What makes them similar? What makes my cylinders and my prisms so similar? Rebecca? Yeah, the two bases thing. All right. Looking over here at our pyramids, we have two shapes left. One of them is a triangular pyramid, one is a rectangular pyramid. Please hold up in your hand the one that you believe to be the triangular pyramid. Okay, I see a couple of different things in the air. Janelli. We're all tracking Janelli. Janelli, why is it that you chose that shape that's in your hand as opposed to the other one? She says it has nothing but triangles, whereas the other one has a rectangle. So that's why she chose that one to be a triangle. Now, talking about faces, how many faces does that triangular pyramid have? Shh. Show me with your fingers. How many faces does the triangular pyramid have? Okay, so you should be showing me 4. Here's the lesson about drawing pyramids. Are you ready for the lesson about drawing pyramids? Pyramids, you draw the base, which should be a hint about the next question I'm going to ask. You draw the base. Always opposite of the base, there is a vertex, so you're going to draw that vertex. Then you connect that vertex to each part of the base. Okay, so this is where you've got to look more three-dimensionally. This is why we have the three-dimensional shapes. Because this is a three-dimensionally drawn triangular pyramid. What you need to do, go ahead and grab your triangular pyramid. If you're having trouble seeing it, kind of place the base and shift it until you kind of see what that looks like on the page. Okay, back to me, 5, 4. Make sure everything's out of your hand and you're tracking me. 3, 2, and 1. Not sure why somebody still has something in their hand. Not sure why you're not tracking me. Still waiting. How many bases does this triangular pyramid have? 1. So when we're talking about pyramids, they have the one base with the point opposite of it. So when we draw it, that's why we just draw the one base, then the point, then connect. What's the shape of the base?
Square.
Triangle. If we've drawn the shape, we can count the vertices. 1, 2, 3, 4. If we're drawing the shape, we can actually count it while we draw. I drew the base, 1, 2, 3, and connected 4, 5, 6. That means the last shape that we have remaining is our rectangular pyramid. How many bases does the rectangular pyramid have? How many bases does the rectangular pyramid have? 1. The shape of the base is a rectangle. It may look like a square, but we don't know. Okay, so the shape of our base is a rectangle. That also tells us how to draw the shape. Remember, we draw our one base, a rectangle, whatever kind of rectangle you want. Draw your one point that is opposite of that base, and connect. So as you're drawing that shape, you should also be able to count the number of edges. So as I draw it, 1, 2, 3, 4. connect 5, 6, 7, 8 edges. Count the vertices, 1 on top, 2, 3, 4, 5 along the bottom. And the number of faces. I count around. I've got 1 triangle, 2 triangle, 3 triangle, 4 triangle, and 1 rectangle. So that's 5 total faces. The reason why it's important to be able to determine the number of faces. As we get into some of the other stuff we're going to do, some of you have learned how to find surface area of a shape. We're going to be talking about surface area again. That means you have to find the area of each face. So it's really important to know how many faces there are to begin with. What is common about all pyramids? What's the same about all pyramids? Kenneth?
We start at the base and end up at one central point.
Yep, one base opposite a vertex. How is each pyramid named? Fernando. How is each pyramid named? How do I know what type of pyramid it is? By the shape of the base. All right, we're going to play a quick game. The game is called Name That Shape. And I'm going to tell you something about a shape. You're going to tell me the name of that shape. Are you listening? Okay. The three-dimensional solid that I'm thinking of has 2 bases. And each of those bases is a pentagon. Name that shape. Kenneth. Shh. Do you need me to repeat it? Say it. Pentagonal prism. How did you get that? How did you get that? Okay, so he listened to what I said. He listened to the shape of the base, and he knew that was going to be the first name of the shape, pentagonal. And then he listened to how many bases there were. I said 2, and we know 2 bases means it's a prism, so he called it a pentagonal prism. If he wanted to draw it, which is what he was talking about, you would draw 2 pentagons that look approximately the same. And you would connect their parts. That is a really shady pentagonal prism. All right. Let's play the game one more time. Are you ready? Are you listening? I'm thinking of a shape. A three-dimensional solid. It has 1 base. And that base is an octagon. Name that shape. Raisa, what's the name of that shape? Has the word octagon in it. That names the shape. That's the first name. And it's a pyramid. How'd you know it was a pyramid? Because it had 1 base. All right, good. It's a fun game. It's my favorite game. It's not my favorite game. All right. Cones. Talking about cones. Let's talk about cones real quick. Cones. How many bases? 1. Shape of the base? How many faces? 1. How many vertices? 1. stab Kenneth with? Huh? How many edges? One. Right around the edge. And why did I talk about the cones when I talked about the pyramids? What's the similarity there?
Because they both have.
Shh. Thank you for raising your hand. Jose? Has one base. Now, this is the big picture for today. What is the difference between prisms and pyramids? Don't call it out. Think to yourself. 15 seconds. What's the difference between prisms and pyramids? I'm going to call on somebody at random, so you don't even have to raise your hand. And it's not going to be very random because I'm just going to pick somebody that I want to call on. So think to yourself, what is the difference between prisms and pyramids? How do I know the difference between prisms and pyramids? Everybody track. Julia, what's the difference between prisms and pyramids? Couldn't have said it better myself. Prisms have two bases.
Couldn't have said that more clear.
And pyramids have one. That's the big picture. All right, so things that we have to be able to do after today. Number one, we have to be able to count faces, bases, vertices, edges. We have to be able to name shapes based on how many bases they have and the shape of the base. We have to recognize cones and cylinders. And this is the last thing. It's not something we absolutely have to do, but I think you should be able to do, is to draw any prism or any pyramid. Okay? So, on your together time, I want you to be focusing on those things.